Hello, and welcome to Educational Triage, where we discuss issues in alternative education. This is a discussion about teaching, by teachers, for teachers, and others who are interested in the alternative education world. We hope you find today's episode relevant, engaging, and useful. And if you do, please subscribe. I'm Tony Hunt, and I'm here to help guide you with the help of my friends Christy and Philip. And we're back, and welcome to Educational Triage. And today I have a very special treat. I am joined with Valinda Jones from Washington. And Valinda, you are the principal of what program in Pierce County?
I'm the principal of Gates Alternative High School in Tacoma, Washington.
Perfect. And then, so tell us about your journey into alternative ed. What brought you into alternative ed?
Well, if I were younger, it'd be a shorter conversation. So sadly, I'm not. So it'll be a little bit on the longer side. But long story short, as my dad would say, my background's in counseling. And I started out as a drug and alcohol therapist in an adolescent inpatient unit down in Los Angeles back in the 80s when it was like 90-day, inpatient rehab. And I used to, as part of my job, I used to go to high schools and speak to students. And I thought, well, this is where the education is. This is where we can do prevention. So I moved back up to Washington State and ran into my old assistant principal from high school, where I spent a lot of time in his office as a student. And he told me about a case management position that was opening up in this school district back in 1990. And it was funded by, back then it was called C-STARS. It was out of the University of Washington, which stood for the Center for Study and Teaching of At-Risk Students. So long time ago. And
Wow.
it was a 5-year grant that was designed around bringing case management services into the school setting. So helping students improve their academics by addressing non-academic barriers, right? Mm-hmm. So I hit the ground running with teams. We call them MTSS teams now, but back then we called them something else, at-risk teams. The word at-risk was the word that we used back then. And that just kind of evolved. Then I became the Safe and Drug-Free Schools coordinator. Then I became the guidance and counseling director, and then 2008 hit. Most of us remember that, and there were going to be cuts all over, and guidance and counseling directors aren't necessarily the most important, right? We're going to preserve the teachers in the classroom, rightfully so. And I had my principal certificate, and I had my program admin certificate, and the principal at this high school had to leave urgently. And so they said, hey, rather than cutting your position, why don't we just move you over to Gates, and you can be there for a year until we figure things out. And so I did that, and it was mayhem. It was out of control. It was not an environment that was conducive to learning. It was 3 different alternative programs in one. And yet I loved it, and I begged to stay, and my superintendent said, sure, if you'll take the job, you can have it. So that's how I ended up in alternative education. I've been here 13 years now.
Wow. So how did your experience going in, because it sounds like you're coming in from a drug and alcohol counseling and then going in and working with students, and so probably seeing some parallels between some of the behaviors for the way, even the dry kids, I'll call them dry, the ones that are non-users.
Yeah.
Even those that you could probably see, did you notice that there were some of the same kinds of behaviors that they were going through, or some of the same triggers that they had for what might happen later to them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, part of my job when I was at the district office was to work K-12, but I started working really closely with the high schools around building data teams. Like I said, they ended up being called RTI teams and then MTSS teams. But our suspensions were out of control, as they were many places, and our dropouts were horrible. Just we were losing kids left and right. And so I remember at that point I would ask principals from the schools to bring in, back then they were hard copy suspensions, and they would be piles, high piles. And we would just roll up our sleeves and read them. Like, why are we pushing kids out of education? Why are we doing this? And even then I had an opinion of alternative education, which is where you take all those kids that you're going to suspend and you push them into alternative education. And then you hope somehow that by doing that, you're going to make everything better for the schools that don't want those kids there anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is responding to your question or not, but when I got here, I definitely saw that that was the case, that those, and by those kids, I mean the ones who were just being misinterpreted and misunderstood and who were, being suspended for attendance. That one's always blown my mind. Or non-compliance, right? Disruptive behaviors. When we started looking at the reasons students were being suspended, they were so open for interpretation. So, I mean, it turned into a whole systemic response, which is what part of my job was at the district office. So I was so excited when I came here because I thought, all these systems that I've been trying to help other principals apply, I'm going to go to this school and do it. And let's see if it works. And it turns out it worked pretty well. I mean, we've got a long way to go, but it worked pretty well.
Oh, awesome. And now, okay, so it was chaotic when you first got there, and then what happened?
Well, we made some big changes really fast. First of all, we came together as a staff and we built what's called the principles that guide our culture. So we agreed as a team what were the principles that were foundational to our learning community as adults. Then we talked about the difference between a culture of complaint and a culture of trust, right? So we knew we had to start with the people who were in the classrooms with the kids. Naturally, there was a little bit of an exodus, if you will, at that time. Some teachers just said, nah, this isn't for us anymore. And then from there, we just started building structures, right? We started building routines. And this is going to be kind of interesting because I know you want to know a little bit about what alternative education is in Washington State.
Right.
We eventually stopped being an ALE or an alternative learning experience and became a basic ed experience, which just means that we changed our funding source. Because at the time it was a half day of school. And what we're realizing, because this is when all the state mandates were coming in, right? We had WASL and then we had all of these other things that were coming at us. There was no way that we were going to be able to educate these students and get them up to standards in half a day. It just wasn't going to happen. And so we adjusted our schedule from, instead of 4 quarters, we became 8 terms, each term equaling a quarter. So our students could double their credit earning potential. Our school district is 100% standards based, like we're really standards based. And so students started meeting standards and earning credit faster. And so teachers started seeing the success of, we implemented safe and civil schools, brought Randy Sprick in to work with our teams, really embraced the whole neurosequential modeling in education through Dr. Bruce Perry, and did some training around that, did a lot of trauma-informed work with our team. Laura Vander Lipsky came into our district and did some work with us. We brought in restorative practices. We've been doing that since 2016. So it was kind of a morphing into just creating a systemic response to students who, going all the way back to the very genesis of my time in the district, who have non-academic barriers to academic success.
So, okay, so you went into a basic ed from an ALE.
Yep.
Because of funding, well, not because of funding, but because of the demands from the state?
No, we switched. Something very important happened at the state level. They stopped tying funding to the Carnegie credit, right? So you didn't have to have X hundred number of hours in a seat in order to earn credit. They moved that requirement so it could be more of a standards based. So, and I don't have all of the language going back that far because there is still an hours, like there is, you have to be in school so many hours. So we did increase the number of hours that students had to be in a class, but we still consider ourselves alternative because we have a schedule that's out of the box and allows students to come in and be more successful that they couldn't do in a more traditional setting.
So you're still actually alternative, but
Yep.
you're just working on operating under a different umbrella.
Exactly, because in Washington State, alternative ALE is defined by your funding source and your instructional model. So typically that just means that most of a student's time is not in a school or in a classroom. That's how they define ALE.
So can you explain that a little bit more? Because I are that they're not in the classroom as much. Does that mean that they're because I know that there's a lot of computer platform work going on,
Right, right,
and so and I had my say, I think, earlier in another episode about what I think about computer platforms um, and the passive learning. And so
right.
I'm kind of curious as to how well that's actually working.
Well, it wasn't working for us, which is why we have 3 programs like that and don't have any programs like that anymore. We couldn't see our students being successful in that environment at all.
Right.
It takes a lot of motivation, and I'm not saying our students aren't motivated. It takes a lot of self-direction. It takes a parent creating a nice quiet space for a student to learn and a student saying, gosh, I can't wait to log in my class and see what my teacher has for me today. um, and, in our district, we're 100% poverty. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're right about maybe 30% white. Our Hispanic population is our highest population. We have a high level of mobility, and we have a lot of families that work. And so that just wasn't going to work for us. So what we did was if we went from a half-day model, and then you have a written student learning plan that says, okay, you're only here half a day, so the rest of the day you're going to go home and learn. And then you sign a contract and you review that contract every month. And our dropout rate was 2 pages long, little tiny print. And our grad rate, I keep it up here, our grad rate was 32%.
Hi,
By the way, we made it up to 78% 2 years ago, pre-COVID.
high five.
Yeah, that was awesome. That's all our kids and our teachers, and like I said, a systemic response that meets the needs of all learners.
Yeah, well, but so I'm kind of baffled. Is the state then telling people that if they want to be an ALE that they need to use computers?
No, no, I don't think so. I think the ALE is kind of, because in Washington, kind of like Oregon, we've got the east side and the west side. So the east side, you can be in an ALE and be going to school, go to a brick and mortar, or go to a teacher twice a week, right? So you can take music twice a week with your music teacher and go to the music class, or do it online. They're just saying that you're not in the classroom setting that whole time,
Got
right?
it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
many hours. I hope that
Okay.
makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And so the West Side just seems to want to do more with the computers then?
Oh, no, no, no. I guess the reason I made that differentiation is because the east side is more rural.
Oh, right,
So,
right,
yeah.
right. No,
So,
I got that. But the
okay.
West Side, I think the majority of people that I met were from the West Side, and the
Uh-huh.
majority of the people that I met are working with platforms. I know Edgenuity was one, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember the others. But
Probably
yeah,
Apex and
hmm
yeah, the online platform, I do feel like it's kind of morphing into that. I think it helps to know what their definition of a non-ALE is. And I'm going to read it. A non-ALE is where student FTE is based on daily attendance. So it's funding that it's basically about their funding source. So
okay,
we base our FTE on attendance. So let's say we reduce a student to a half day.
hmm
In an ALE, we would just write that into their student learning plan, and the state would continue to give us full FTE as long as they're making progress.
okay, got it, got it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's really interesting because I would be interested at another time to sit down with you and figure something out on that. Because to me, it's fascinating. because I know that everybody here talks about the Carnegie units.
Right.
We have to conform to the Carnegie units. And it really doesn't do the kids all that much good if the kids can are able to get through enough stuff
Right.
during that time.
So here in Washington State, it boils down to how many hours are they at school,
Okay.
right? So
Right. So, but I know that a full day, but I do know that 3 hours can be counted as a full day
in ALE,
for just regular school. If the kids are there for a half a day, it'll count as a full day, my understanding.
I don't think that's the case for Washington State.
Okay.
I would want to double check that for you, but I'm pretty sure we're locked into a 6.5 hour day. We get some latitude around early release days
Hmm.
and conferences and things like that, but I feel like we're pretty locked into a full day. And so we do have a full day, the same full day that the comprehensive high schools have, we have here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, moving on then, what would you, granted that not everything is working really well, what is something that you would want to, what is your greatest accomplishment there aside from your graduation rate, which you've more than doubled? What is your other greatest accomplishment in that program, do you think?
That we've rebranded alternative education. So I meet with every student before we enroll them, and they're
Hmm.
referred from our comprehensive high school. So students get referred. And when they used to come here, they thought it was the school where the bad kids go. And now we have kids self-referring, wanting to come to this school because they hear this is the school where they can get caught up in their credits. This is the school where teachers really care and listen. This is a school that has smaller class sizes, so they get a lot of help. This is the school that's more like a family. We have we're the Gates Gators. We have a saying, Gator for life. This is a school where students who graduated 10 years ago still come back and visit us all the time. And so I think the rebranding of what alternative school looks like in our district and the stigma that it
Hmm.
once had, I think that's a big accomplishment to have the community view us. I mean, we have parents calling us now saying, I've heard great things about this school and I want my kid in there.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's been big, and that's been a team effort for sure.
And see, you actually boil it down to the relationship that you've built with all the students and the families and the community too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now we get lots of family members and cousins and people like that. It's fun.
Oh, that's fantastic. What would you change
Well, funny you
or
should
work
ask
on?
that. Huh? What?
Or work on?
Well, we just applied for and received from the State Board of Education a mastery-based learning collaborative grant. And that is what I would change. We still have 5 periods a day. We still have a bell. We still have an 8-term schedule. We still have grades reported on grade day. We still have teachers teaching lesson plans to all students. We have a couple classes, project-based learning classes and independent study classes. But I'm hoping that this mastery-based learning collaborative will be an opportunity for us to we've kind of blown up the schoolhouse. Now this is a really violent metaphor. I kind of want to blow up the walls now and have a learning environment that is 100% directed by what the student needs to master in terms of their learning. I want them to drive that. We've already done some background work in UDL, Universal Design for
Hmm.
Learning. We've been working on that for a couple of years, trying to wrap our brains around that, and project-based learning. Recognizing that some of our kids come to us with skill deficits, so you can't really jump into a project if your reading skills aren't where they should be, but you can certainly create a project at the level that a student is instead of waiting for them to bring up their skill level. And it can still be incredibly rigorous and involve critical thinking and just out of the box opportunities for students to be in their community and collaborate with teachers. And so that's where I hope we go next. It's a 3-year grant. This is our planning year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, super
We'll have to
excited.
we'll have to stay in touch on that.
Yeah, happy to.
Definitely. Definitely. I like that idea because, well, Peter Gray from Boston College talks about how learning is biological and how basically children educate themselves until they come to school, and then we just sort of smack the learning out of them. And this
Right.
kind of it sounds like you're re-innervating those synapses and everything like that in the brain and getting all that going again.
Yeah, I sure hope so. The other thing, learning is all about relationships. You have to be in a relationship to learn, right? You have to have some kind of trust and something that's inspiring you to want to go through that productive struggle to get to the other side. And so I believe that we've got the relationships that we need to have in the system to support students. But now I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for all of us because, it means saying that maybe we're not going to teach this portion of, I don't know, the Constitution, whatever. I don't want to pick on social studies teachers, but maybe we'll teach, they'll get to learn about the constitutional experience and the power and the value of having something like that through their own, maybe they'll write their own constitution or something like that, right? I don't know.
Right. No, it all makes perfect sense. I think it's wow. Wow, that is exciting. I'm jealous. I am so jealous.
I'll keep you in the loop. I was so excited to get the grant. I was really worried.
Is it possible for me to come up sometime and just take a look?
Oh my gosh, we would love to have you. Yeah, totally.
I would love to do that. Thank you. And I'm going to ask you too, is this why you find this, well, I, with alternatives, because you don't get your funding from it, so you can't say that you are an ALE, but you really are alternative. And is this one of the reasons why you find it so exciting? Because you can always be challenging and challenged?
100%. I have a really supportive school district,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so their approach to alternative education has always been that we're the research and development school. If we can do something and be successful, and we take an action research approach, so we're constantly collecting data to see if something's working. But in alternative education, if it's not working, you can change it tomorrow. Whereas, in a comprehensive school where there's so many more students, turning that ship around is very difficult if you can do it at all in a school year. But here we
Mm-hmm.
can. So yeah, the opportunity to be innovative and work with a team that is open to that is really, really cool. And students too.
What's your student to teacher ratio?
Oh, that's a good question. That's online. It's high. It's good. Let's see. Right now we've got 109 students and I have 13 teachers. So whatever that is.
So it's less than 1 in 10.
Yeah, it's good. And again, going back to the level of support that I get from the district, I also have an assistant principal, a school counselor, a family partnership coordinator, an instructional coach, 3 office staff, an ELL para, special ed para. So we have good support, I think.
And then how much freedom do teachers have?
Say more about that.
Well, let's say that I want to teach English. What are my parameters?
So the district has standards, and we have a standards-based grade book. So if I'm teaching, 11th grade English, and I go into my grade book, I'm going to be pulling standards that are 11th grade English standards, and the expectation is that I'm teaching those standards.
Okay, but how I do that is kind of my playground.
Little bit, yeah. I mean, we have adopted curriculum, and we're not
Mhm.
supposed to deviate too much from the adopted curriculum,
Okay.
but there is some flexibility to be adaptable to what the students need and what the students are asking for as well.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. And then where do you see your program in 10 years?
I hope there's more programs like this in 10 years. I would still say, even with all the work that's been done in education, I still think kids get pushed out of the system and then they land here, right?
Mhm.
So that's a really good question. In 10 years, I hope that we're thriving even more. In 10 years, I hope that we are extending opportunities like this. Right now, we've only got 11th and 12th graders at my school because we only have capacity to serve that many since COVID. So many have gotten that far behind in credit. And I wish that alternative education was something that people could enter into earlier in their career, that we wouldn't wait for the shoe to drop to go, oh my gosh, you're not going to graduate on time. You better go to the alternative high school. Some people just learn better like this, right? Some
Right.
people thrive more like this.
Right. Because they need it. Well, they don't want to be a number. They don't want to be shoved around as inventory. They want to have that relationship. They, in a sense, they think that the mainstream, because it's so regimented, I'm going to say, because just because of the sheer numbers, but it's more like a prison to them.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this in a class, and the teacher said, "No, we're not." And the kid said, "Oh yeah, we are." He's right. This is a prison. I mean, we're just inmates. And if you look at it, I mean, it's becoming more and more corporate in many ways. And I think that that's at the detriment to the students. And I don't know. And when we talk about systemic racism, it's kind of like we want a one size fits all, and we're not really looking at the whole child. We're not looking at the students. We're not looking at what does each student need. And I get it. It's rough in a huge, huge classroom, but there's still something that can be done. I don't know.
I want every student that leaves my school. I remember my first graduation speech. I was really nervous about it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, principals have to do the graduation speech. And I thought, we're going to talk about love. Because I want my students to know that when they come to school, they should feel loved. And that was not really well received. It's like, no, we educate. We don't love. We educate. And I'm like, no. Like we love, right? And kids need to know that, and they need to understand that. So when I was going back to that, when I look at referrals from the comprehensive high schools, and I read their discipline, right? I always read their discipline because we don't have fights at this school. That first year we had a lot of fights. We don't have fights at the school. Like we went from suspending 200 and some odd kids to we did have to suspend 2 this year. That just all went away when we started loving the kids, and they know it's genuine and they know it's from the heart. So when I read a referral and it says, cell phone policy, disruption, stormed out of class, told teacher to F off, I'm like, oh, you're going here. We want you. This is the right place for you. So they're just, they're amazing, wonderful people who have felt so powerless for so long and so silenced that when they come to a school where they're seen and they're heard, and kids say to me, I've never been on the honor roll before, or I've never gotten an award before. And I'm like, well, get ready for it, because you're going to get an award like every term. We just create so many opportunities for students to experience that winning streak. Because I don't remember where I learned this, but until you know how to equate doing something good or well with feeling good, you don't know how to recreate that moment, right? And so we either get into patterns of despair or we get into patterns of hope. And so, Dr. Seligman, who I think he was the author of Learned Helplessness, and then he's now the author of, Learned Hopefulness. He's the psychology of hope. Yeah, I would have to say that in 10 years, I hope every school is founded on hope and student agency and voice and joy and love.
Definitely. I mean, our goal here, and I've told everybody because I pulled this from a Ben Bergeron book, and he said, well, because he's CrossFit, and he said, when people walk into my gym, I want them to know that they're welcome, wanted, and needed.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for my students, but I also want them to be valued.
Yep.
And so they have a say here. And so everybody is greeted as they walk in. We talk to them. We know what's going on with them. If they're not here, we're on that phone and we're calling them and we're making sure. And if we're not here, the communication is alive in here, I think. And so also with the families. And they can't disappear.
And when they get that message, they
Mhm.
stop trying so hard to be invisible, don't they?
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. And
so cool.
some of them are terrified, but it's a good terrifying.
Some of them are a little terrifying that first time you meet them too, but
Yeah,
they always come around.
it's true. It's true. So, okay, so let's have you create your own school from the bottom up.
Oh, from the bottom up. Wow.
Hmm.
Well, like I said, no walls, no bells.
Okay.
Um, let's see.
So it's going to
Students
be
are
an outside school,
no. It's going to be. We're going to have a building.
right?
It would be open. It'd be energetic. It would be vibrant. There would be students collaborating, teachers working with students, light bulbs going off in heads, presentations over here, community people coming in over here. There'd be a service dog. I wish I could have a service dog, but we don't have one. Um, there would be like this sense of urgency, but not panic. There would be safety. Let's see. Oh, there'd be crucial conversations happening all over the place. There'd be people who, students would be challenged on their thinking, but they'd also, students bring behaviors to school, let's be honest, right? But instead of having to punish those behaviors or give them consequences, there'd be conversations about the impact that those behaviors have on the greater community and their role in that greater community. So, I mean, I guess it'd be like a utopia, sort of.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and plenty of resources. And I really, one thing I wish we could do, I know other schools do this, and we don't, and I don't know if it's a matter of resources or we just don't know how to do it, but I wish our building was open longer. And what we're doing for students during the day, we could do for families and parents in the evening. You know.
There was an article that read from I read it many years ago, but on their track to try to close the achievement gap, they had wraparound services. So in the evenings, they had families would come in. I don't know how many nights a week. Maybe it was two, but they would have medical, dental.
Oh,
They would have those services available. They would also have mental health services available for the families. They would have tutoring for the students, and some of the high school students could tutor the younger ones, and that was helpful. Some translation services, some legal services. So the school became more of a community center for all the parents. So the parents became more entrenched in the learning process. So for them, if their student wasn't doing well, they were losing a part of themselves because
yeah.
they needed their student to be there, and it would encourage them. And I remember that they said that things actually started improving because
Wow.
the parents were actually seeing the schools as being more helpful, and the students saw that the parents were actually working there as well.
Yeah.
So I tried to get something here where we had an ESL night for all the parents of who spoke a second language to come in. And we were going to work in conjunction with the TOEFL programs at the universities and have that one night, and then maybe have a night where we would have the parents go in and do technology. And
Oh,
we could, and that way, well, because there's still a lot of parents who have absolutely no clue what they're doing.
right,
No.
right.
And there's even some, well, I'm going to say people who are just slightly older than I am, who are a little lost, and people who are younger than I am too, who are a little lost. But, and so that would be there, and then open up a center for community activities that the parents could actually do and make that more of a community center so the parents could do something. And the parents received that idea very well, and they loved that idea. But as you know, things happen, and staff changes. And so when you have a couple of staff who are working with that, and especially when you have administrators change out, then you lose that whole flow.
Right.
So you're not able
Yeah.
to do it because different people have different visions. But yeah, and I think doing the community kind of center work and how you're talking about it would be fantastic. I love
Yeah,
that
we
idea.
would love that. I mean, we have those services for our students. Where we're located, it's 100% unincorporated, so we have absolutely no city and no infrastructure. So,
Hmm.
like the alternative high school in the city of Tacoma, they have a medical center on site because they've got a partnership with, you know,
Right.
all those resources, which is great. I mean, that's great. But, I sit over here going, well, I want my medical center. Where's my dental office? So, um, but, you know, eventually, I suppose.
I bet if you did outreach and you could probably get something going with some of the businesses, because I mean the community outreach would be great PR for them.
You're right. And we actually, I didn't mention this, but I really want to mention this. We do have some amazing community partners. We have a church that has adopted our entire school. Every one of our students is going to get a holiday gift, every one of them with $50
Wonderful.
budget, all wrapped and they all gave their wish list. So we've had that a couple years running. We have another church that stocks our pantry, so kids can come in and get a cup of coffee, a power bar. It's healthy food, it's ethnic food, so they get whatever they want. We never deny them that. We have another community partner that just keeps giving us money. So if I have a student who needs a coat, my family partnership coordinator says, Val, I'm going to Target to buy so and so a coat. So actually, here, this is a real quick story. We had one girl. We are not strict here. We're just so glad to see you. Right? We're just so glad to see you. I mean, we have standards and we have structure and we have
Hmm.
protocols, but this girl was constantly wearing her pants that had pot leaves all over them, or a sweatshirt that had a giant pot leaf on it. And I'm getting, Val, what are you going to do about this? Aren't you going to make her stop? That's inappropriate. She shouldn't wear that. And so we built a relationship with her. And then I said, hey, if if we could buy you new clothes, would you trade those for the new clothes? She goes, yeah. So I had our family partnership coordinator go buy her a bunch of new clothes, and she's never worn anything with a pot leaf on it again. And that's what we can do in alternative education.
Yeah, definitely, because sometimes they don't have the resources to get anything else.
No, or sometimes you have a mentality of we have rules about dress code and you just broke the dress code and we've asked you 3 times not to, so 3 strikes you're out, you're suspended. Now you're going to get farther behind. Now you're going to get more credit deficient. Now you're going to feel worse about yourself as a learner, and now you're going to hate school even more.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no sense of trust. There's no building of community with that.
Right,
What do
right.
you think? What do they get? And I'm going to say they, as meaning the people that are out there, that wonky entity. What do you think that they get wrong about alternative ed?
That it's where the bad kids go. They're all drug addicts. They all have bad family lives. Yeah, they're all poor. All the negativity that comes along with it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students who just have some social anxiety, who just want to be in a smaller learning environment. Our students are brilliant. They're so smart. But when you don't get to shine because you've got Johnny straight A AP over here, that just kind of diminishes your voice in a classroom full of 30 students.
Hmm.
And then they come here and then they realize that they're smart and that they can learn and that learning can actually be something that brings them joy and is fun. Um, yeah, so that's not the case. They're just all really beautiful, wonderful people who are surviving, some of them, circumstances that most adults will never even have to step foot in.
Definitely grit.
Grit. Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of grit and resilience. I mean, I hate to, it's that word gets watered down, but these kids are way beyond resilient, and they have hope for a future. They want
Hmm.
to be successful.
Oh,
A lot of
definitely.
these kids, they don't know that they're learners, right? Because they've had, this is something I'm so excited about. We don't put F's on our report cards anymore. There's no fail. You either get credit or you don't get credit, because
Hmm.
failing, they just look at that and it's so diminishing. So, They're not failures.
Right. There are ways for them to improve. I mean, I always leave the door open. So if a kid doesn't like their grade, they they say, "Well, what do I need to do to improve it?" And then we figure
Yeah.
that out, and then they work on it.
Yeah, we just call it a not yet.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So, what would be one thing that you would want to leave the listeners with?
Only one?
Well, you can.
I'm kidding.
Do you have a list? No.
Well,
Yeah.
here,
What would you? Okay, I'm going to take that away. Let me rephrase that. What would you like to leave the listeners with?
I keep these things on my board just to always remind me, like never ever forget. I guess there's so many things like assume awesomeness. I love that one. Like, we just have to assume that, but that's not it. That's not
That's
it.
a good one.
It's kids do well when they can. It's to me that simple. So if they're not doing well, we haven't given them everything they need to be successful. It's on us. It's not on them. I mean, I get it. They have to come to school to learn, sure. But they either need some soft skills, right? Like frustration tolerance is a huge one. Stick-to-itness, perseverance. And then there is one more. It's on my board. I always keep everything. Maladaptive behavior serves a purpose. So if that behavior is looking maladaptive, it's so important that we look at ourselves and the systems that we've created and say, if our culture is what we allow, what have we allowed that is cultivating that maladaptive behavior? Yeah.
Love it.
I guarantee the answer is 99% of the time holding up the mirror and looking back at ourselves and our systems.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I can't say that I'm a saint. And I know that I make mistakes, but I think that our relationship with our students, and I think that the teachers in the mainstream that the students admire the most are the ones who prove fallibility and confront that.
Yeah, yeah.
And are authentic, and they are human.
Yeah. Well, I guess the final thing would be that it's okay to love.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a touchy-feely kind of person.
I'm not either. But there's that.
But you're right. You're right.
There's that sense of belonging.
Yes.
It's not. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. I get that. But
and hugs and all that.
No. In fact, don't do that. I just don't do that.
But it's about being there and being present and knowing that you're accepted no matter what.
Yeah.
And they can fail, and we're just unconditional about it because we're there for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wow. Isn't it amazing how much we can learn from each other? I mean, the people she quoted, the books, more for us to look at. There was so much more information for us. And, to bring it all back together and to have it qualified in one simple phrase, that it's about love. And it's all about love. And that's something that nurtures us all. And it comes in so many different forms that we can give without even realizing that that's what we're doing. So thank you, Valinda. And thank you all for listening today. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.